What is up, everybody? Ladies and gents, my name is Michael Sikand. I'm host of the Our Future podcast, and today we're going to dive into the future of education. I'm joined by two incredible guests that you guys are going to love hearing from. First of which is Betsy Corcoran. She spent years writing about science and technology in magazines such as Scientific American and Forbes, then decided to start EdSurge, which is a site that connects education, technology, entrepreneurs with the educators themselves. So this is the perfect environment for her. Our second panelist is Jonathan Holloway. He's the former dean at Yale College. He's the outgoing chief academic officer at Northwestern. And soon he's about to become the president of Rutgers University on July 1st. He's about to step into the new role. So I want to kick this off, Jonathan. You are taking on this job at a crucial time. It's definitely a serious test of leadership. What has it been like, and what are you imagining for college in the fall? What's kind of the synopsis here?
I'm happy. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for the question. The broad view, you've heard bits and pieces of it already. I mean, Chancellor Larive from UC Santa Cruz outlined what would be happening at that campus, and a lot of research universities are kind of looking the same. Mixed kind of format in the fall. Forget lecture courses; those are not going to be live anywhere in the fall. We just don't have the capacity. And a lot of it, we're just trying to figure things out as we go ahead, trying to stay one step ahead of the virus. One thing that's often not talked about is that students are desperate to come back, and we'd love to have them back. And the students, by and large, are going to be okay in terms of the way this virus works. But we need to be thinking about the staff and the faculty. I mean, students may be back, we may not have faculty in the classrooms itself. So this is one of that's sort of the baseline. Then other speakers, and unfortunately we lost Anthony during a really great keynote, were pointing to issues of accessibility. And this is a huge issue. I mean, it was a huge issue before any of this stuff happened, before this wonderful year of 2020 we've all been enjoying. But it's all been heightened. I mean, COVID and now this moment of racial recognition have highlighted the deep structural inequalities that are found throughout society. And they also live within higher education as well. That look, I'm about to go to a major public institution having come from a major private institution. There's different kinds of students there, not in terms of the brain power, in terms of the resources. Going from a Rutgers to a private liberal arts college, radically different kind of situation for how those schools are going to operate in the fall. Fold in community colleges, which teach most students in this country in higher ed. Totally different formula altogether. And each of them interacts differently with technology as well. So there is no one-size-fits-all answer. It's incredibly complicated, but some of the core issues are accessibility, coming from income inequality, a lot of students with unsure housing arrangements, and then people who are, really reduced. This is their technology, just the phone. They don't have laptops. They don't have desktop computers. And they don't have AR sets. So I'm really glad that we're hearing about technology that can be used in other kinds of formats. So it's a complicated situation right now. And, during an earlier meeting, Betsy and I were talking, she's got a lot of really fascinating ideas, or I guess commentary about how complicated the situation is.
Definitely. I mean, Betsy, you're also wrangling this from the perspective of a CEO of a education technology firm. So we'd love to hear how you're kind of addressing this question of what higher ed will look like in the fall.
Right. Well, first, thank you for having me, and a huge, huge thank you to all of the educators at all levels, K-12, higher ed, and quite frankly, to all the family guardians who have turned into teachers in the last couple of months. I think that some of the points that Jonathan just made are really, really fundamental. Right? We're part of a group that works with the Gates Foundation, and there's a study that they've been doing that suggests that as many as 40% of students in higher ed don't have access to a computer. That means they're trying to do stuff on their cell phone. It could mean that they're trying to do things while they're managing their own children. So we really have to start with what kinds of capabilities do people have right now. When I was at Forbes, I did an interview with an entrepreneur that I thought summed up for me perfectly what is both the glory and the problems of entrepreneurship? And he said this, he said, well, I get a lot of speeding tickets. And I said, really? So why do you get so many speeding tickets? He said, well, I go through a lot of red lights. And the problem is that I'm not looking at the red light in front of me. I'm always looking one block ahead. That's a little bit of the challenge that we have, particularly right now with the confluence of education and technology. We have a lot of issues that are in the block right in front of us. And we've got to address those. We've got to address questions of access. We've got to address questions of safety. And we have to address questions of how kids are relating to each other and to their educators and to the learning, if we are going to get learning done at all. One of the things they learned in China, Anthony made a number of references, I think, at the beginning to some of the experiences in China. I've talked to a lot of educators in China, and what they said was that unless there is a social context, no learning is happening. So if we want to do learning with all of the great technology that we have, we've got to start with accessibility, we've got to start with safety, and we've got to start with the social context for learning.
Yeah, I mean, those tech demos, believe me, they were sick. I mean, Aaron Dence, you guys raised $22.5 million. That's quite the chunk of change. And then we're looking at, TD at Google. That stuff's awesome, but it's impossible if the students don't have a laptop. I mean, that 40% statistic is crazy. So this is a question I have for both of you. Are institutions going to make it compulsory? Are they going to have to provide laptops to every single student? Is that something that schools are going to have to budget, going on, and it'll be that way forever?
I'll start with that. That's something that schools with the resources are able to do. And that goes back to my first statement. I mean, I know the world of higher ed, but K through 12's radical breadth about what kind of resource space schools have. Even within a couple of miles of each other, schools can be able to afford to buy laptops for everybody, loaners, and other schools, never going to happen. I used to teach at Yale, and Yale has a ton of money and is starting to buy laptops for its most resource needed students, which is great. And that was about 6 years ago, I think. And Rutgers is now having to do the same thing as well. Totally different resource base, but they know that they will lose the students. They won't be able to do their work if they don't provide, very baseline laptops. So the schools that can do it are going to. The schools that need to do it are going to try to find a way. And then there are the schools that can't do it. And I don't have an answer for them. It's a crisis.
Yeah, what he said. There's one
Certainly.
other really interesting question, which is I did a story interviewing a couple of young women who go to I think it's called the Brooklyn Academy for Young Women. Three really, really interesting young women. One was originally from Nigeria, one was from the Middle East, and I forget where the third one was from. But they were representative of many students who start off speaking a different language. And they talked about some of the challenges, even in using things like Zoom. So they were all fortunate. They did have some kind of computer that they were working with their teacher on. But one of the girls pointed out, I've got 3 keyboards. One's in Arabic, one's in English, and I participate in class all the time. I raise my hand, but when we're online and I'm supposed to type my questions, I can't type as fast as the other kids do. I don't type in English as quickly as some other kids do. These issues are fundamental. So here's a challenge that I would put to the tech world. I think that Doug actually started us off at the beginning really well, and we talked about how educators have learned an extraordinary amount. I guess that was Anthony who said that. Educators have learned an extraordinary amount about how to use technology in an incredibly short period of time. The next challenge is going to be for the tech entrepreneurs to rethink how they are building their technology and what they are delivering so that it will better suit the needs of students, particularly students of color, particularly students of low income, particularly students for whom English is not a first language. We need to be rethinking these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we need to move away from this one size, fits all model. Jonathan, you told me you're a big fan of the old fashioned lecture, but every student learns in a fundamentally different way, whether it be audio or visual. And these education technology tools, they do provide a way to customize and tailor the learning experience for each individual student, however they may best learn. Instead of just being lectured at, there's other ways in which we can really engage the learner. We can really focus in on them and show them and display that learning in a way that matters and is available to them. So what positives do you guys see in this remote learning format we've seen in the past few months? What is the upside of this? What have we seen that's actually increased the learning environment, whether it be students that can, come out and be more confident to speak in classroom discussions because there isn't just one person dominating the room. I mean, there are positives to this, and I want to know what you guys might think of those.
I just have to chuckle, Michael, making me sound like a dinosaur who likes to lecture. I like great lecturers. I mean, I think they're mesmerizing, great storytellers. And some of that work will translate really well in an online format. Think of the great TED Talks and how people can just walk on a stage and just get an audience like that. There's something charismatic that beams through the screen. But that's not most people. Of course it's not. So you do raise a good point about we have an opportunity now to create a diversity of pedagogical approaches to delivering similar content. Yes, and we should try, we should experiment. But I just get very hesitant because I'm a traditionalist when the next new idea comes out that is going to get rid of X or Y forever. I mean, massive open online courses, that was going to be, there are going to be no more lectures. Well, MOOCs kind of disappeared. I mean, they're still around, but I mean, in terms of overwhelming the world, not so much because it exposed other kinds of problems. We need to keep experimenting, but we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater at the same time. One thing I wanted to add to what Betsy was saying before, and it does relate to this online situation we have, which is filled with opportunity, but just to say again, we've got to think of the fundamentals, not just in terms of the equipment, but think of what Anthony had to deal with in the very beginning. If you don't have a Wi-Fi signal, it doesn't matter. You're toast.
Right.
And if you don't have bandwidth, you're toast. So these are things that have to be managed as well.
Betsy, what do you think about the positives here?
Michael, I have spent my entire career, which sometimes feels like 100,000 years, writing about the potential for technology. And I started EdSurge because I do believe that there are ways that technology can truly support and help. We need to do it carefully, and we need to do it with research. This morning I spoke with Jessie Woolley Wilson, who is CEO of a company called Dreambox. And she talked about how much courage it took for her to go to her board and say, let's do efficacy testing on Dreambox. She went to Harvard. In fact, she had to tell her board, you may have to hold on to extra money for us because if we fail this test, we're going to have to come back and retool. Now, it turns out that Dreambox did really, really well, but it underscores a really important point. We need to understand what works, when it works, and why it works. And there are great examples. We were talking just before this the fact that the FDA just approved the first prescription video game, and it's for treating kids with ADHD. And they spent something like 6 years or so, I'm trying to look at the number, 7 years of clinical testing with students before it was approved. That seems like a long time, but it's a really important question. What works? When does it work? And what's the context? And as long as we keep asking those questions, then we won't be chasing our tail so much.
Yeah, and I'm happy we're here to ask those questions. I think it's definitely really important to have this convo. But I also think there's a democratization angle to this on top of the inequities, which obviously are there, and they glare at us very, very boldly. But the democratization concept, Stanford's class size hasn't increased in decades. So what happens when the smaller schools maybe go under? The big guys like Yale and Rutgers and Michigan, they're left up, and the rest of the schools and there's a democratization, and online classes are made more widely available at those schools. Are online degrees going to become more credible? Can you get an online degree from Harvard and it be are we going to move away from college being social credentials? You know, I went to the Ivy League. Well, you know, yeah, you spent 4 years there, but what, you know, what are you actually learning? And I think the online education certificates and MOOCs, like you said, Jonathan, are something that can come out of this in a more democratic way for learning.
Oh, there's tremendous potential there. I don't want to be misunderstood in that regard. I just think that while the pace of change is increasing exponentially, there are still just very classic aspects in the world of higher education that are sustaining. And there's a reason why. It's because they speak to things that are fundamental to our humanity. Now, you raised a very good question about what is college for? I mean, that you didn't say it literally like that, but paraphrasing, is it to get a credential that allows you to get a great job? And that's a very reasonable expectation for college, certainly. Or is it also, or might it also be an opportunity for training in a deeply entrenched social network that helps you build a network that will extend beyond your years in college and will help you learn how to be a critical thinker, as I think it was AD was saying earlier in this presentation. I mean, that is something that is kind of an intangible. I mean, in the tech world, it's not that the great tech companies, as I understand it, because this is not my world, are looking for someone who can build the widget, but they're thinking of someone who can think of some conceptual way to imagine a different way of understanding things. And then we can find people to build this sort of thing. So you need to have people who are trained in lots of different ways. And that's where I think higher education really, its value proposition is misunderstood. Even though you're absolutely correct that when you're going to Harvard or Stanford or Michigan or whatever, you're going there for the brand as much as, I mean, I don't know much as, but you're going as part of the reason you're going there. Of course it is. Having those places go online, or having some aspects go online, I think you'll see it on the edges, on the fringes. I think you'll see it in stackable certificates, especially for lifelong learning. But when thinking about what I'll call the traditional 4-year undergraduate experience, it is hard for me, granted I'm deeply biased, to get outside of the bricks and mortar, the power, the transformative power of the bricks and mortar environment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing I'll add to what Jonathan said, and I'm guilty too. I went to a terrific 4-year school. It was a lovely experience and I had a great time.
It's fun.
But you know, the typical higher ed student these days is actually not someone at a 4-year school. It's someone who may be working a job, maybe working 2 jobs, may have kids. And that's exactly where, Michael, your point about democratization really comes into play, right? The people who cannot afford, who do not have the privilege of going to a 4-year experience, but are incredibly smart, incredibly, you know, energized around building a career. For those folks, the whole collection of things that we're creating are incredibly valuable, whether it's certificates, stackable certificates, some of the MOOC courses, boot camps, these sorts of things. And there's one other element to it, which is increasingly we're starting to see new ways where students can pay for these things in a way that is more affordable, because the greatest tragedy is for someone who starts down the path of higher ed, doesn't quite get the degree, winds up with a lot of debt, and then they didn't just not get ahead, they actually went backwards. So I think that there is tremendous potential for this technology. And as companies such as Google and Microsoft really say, yeah, we want to hire people with these different degrees, that really supports the community. And it does help a tremendous number of people, including people who, you know, may not wind up at an exclusive 4-year school. So there is great opportunity and great potential, both in terms of making it available and hopefully in terms of making it affordable. But again, we're talking about many different things. There's no silver bullet. Someone said to me the other day, Betsy, you've spent 10 years now writing about education technology. What's the best thing you've seen? And the answer is there's no single best thing. There's not one answer. There's a lot of different pieces. And we all have to understand what we're trying to accomplish, why we're doing something, and then look for the right tools. I used to like to say to my team, if you said to me, Betsy, what's the best shoe you can buy? I'll say, well, you going dancing or you going hiking? Because I'm going to have different recommendations for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing some comments in the chat. Is college still worth it? Because, tell me as an employer, I'm a technology company. Why is someone who has a 4-year degree in English studies more employable than someone who has a few certificates in data analytics and social media marketing? Why is that person who went to a 4-year institution more employable? I feel like we can democratize the workforce in this sense. We had a presidential candidate, Andrew Yang, he got up there on that stage and talked about the fact that all these jobs are going to be automated away. And the workforce needs to retrain, quite frankly, and it's a dire situation. So what do we see in that the price of colleges increased 8-fold compared to inflation? That's crazy. I don't know whether it's administrative bloat or whatever other reason, but how can we, I just think that hard skills and these certificates are something that we can really get behind. And I just want to know, why is someone who goes to a 4-year college with a liberal arts degree more employable than someone with some great certificates and online learning solutions that they may start during COVID?
I think you raised about 35 different issues in that little bit of space.
Sorry to put you on the spot, John.
No, we just don't have the time to address them all. I'll talk about one or two things very quickly, and Betsy can amplify or answer all the other 33 issues. I think there is in our culture today a radical misunderstanding or underappreciation of liberal arts. First of all, STEM isn't the liberal arts. People think of liberal arts as just humanities, and that's not what liberal arts actually is. It's a way of approaching higher education. But the thing is that the experience you get in an English course of philosophy major, English major, philosophy major, history major, is not that you can recite the facts of an event, such as any historian thinks about them, or quote a critical text, is that you developed a sort of a suppleness in your ability to read text closely and problem solve in creative ways. And there's no doubt that a humanist does need to be skilled up in tech aspects. That's a whole nother language you need to learn, no doubt about it. But the kind of skills that are highly employable on day one after college graduation, they may be fundamentally changed in 2 years, along the lines of what Andrew Yang was talking about, you quoted, because things are going to automate and change. So you need to have somebody with the kind of flexibility of mind and critical thinking skills to be able to retool and understand critical and complex cultural worldviews. That's where the liberal arts plays an important role. And absolutely, you're not going to get the same salary in year one coming out with an English degree, let's say, or pick my field, a history degree, as you will an engineering degree. You're not. But 10 to 15 years later, you may the ball may be in the earning potential of someone in philosophy, actually, as the field, is actually much higher, long run. But we don't think in long runs. And tech is not designed really for long runs. It's constant innovation. So I get the question. I understand where it's coming from. It's very pragmatic. I think you're just going to have to seek, the answer is going to be in some sort of hybrid, traditional liberal arts education with a tech underpinning for those students who are not tech oriented, and an environment where you can have programs that are like stackable certificates for lifelong learners so they can keep retooling themselves down the line.
Sure, Betsy, what do you think?
Jonathan doesn't know this, but my husband spent a couple of years and produced a book called You Can Do Anything, The Surprising Power of a Liberal Arts Degree. So I'm afraid that I kind of radically agree with his core approach. Sorry about that one. But here's the point. Didi had that great list of things that he explored with The Economist about what are the skills and capabilities that people need in the future. And he made the point, nowhere on there was, jQuery or, Drupal or anything else, right? Those things are going to change all the time. We absolutely need to have access to how to learn everything from Zoom to Excel, to jQuery. We need to have access to how to learn those things, and we are going to need those all of our lives. The idea that you have one job and you're only going to stay there has been profoundly disproven. Michael, I hate to tell you this, but you will probably have 30 jobs by the time you reach, the age that I am, or some of the panelists, right? So you're going to need to have a lot of access to education. If you have the privilege of a 4-year experience, there's a tremendous amount that you will learn about life, about yourself, about, as Jonathan nicely said, the suppleness of how to think. Is it the only way to do that? No. There's lots of other ways, but it is a great privilege. And for everyone who has an opportunity to do it, most people walk away and say, that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life.
The student debt crisis is quite the bubble. I mean, it's quite a mass. And there's actually been some quite interesting models in which to enable students to pay for college that have come out. One was pioneered by Purdue, and that's an income share agreement. Now, that to me does not sound like a solution to the price of higher ed, in that students promise away some portion of their salary in future years. I mean, that just sounds like a gamble, a Faustian gamble. That sounds like a deal with the devil there. And are strategies like that going to be the ones that enable students to go to university, or how are we going to reduce the price of higher education?
So a couple of things. Number one is, you're absolutely right. As I said earlier, to walk out of a university or a master's program with $100,000 worth of debt is criminal. That puts people back. I was in Indiana a couple of months ago, and the guy who picked me up and drove me to the hotel said that he had graduated with $100,000 worth of debt. When I graduated from college, I had taken out the maximum amount of loans that I could, which at that point in time, and I'll date myself, was something like $10,000. That meant that if my first job paid me, $30,000, that meant that it was a third of my income. That means that by contrast, that kid needed to have a starting job that paid him $300,000 a year to have something comparable to what my experience was. That's criminal. There's no question about that. The ISA agreements that you talked about may not be the best way to get there, but they certainly are starting us on a path towards asking the question of how is there more cost sharing, either between an employer or a student or someone else. The price has to come down. There's no question around that. But if it is possible to bring down that cost and to have an opportunity to go to a 4-year degree, that's a terrific experience for people. But it is an enormous, enormous problem.
So I want to ask you guys, I know you might want to touch on that, Jonathan, but I want to ask you guys, what should students and educators alike keep in mind for the fall? Like, this is going to be a learning experience like no other. Like, what do we have to keep in mind to navigate this successfully? Now, we don't know what it's going to look like. We have a taste, Jonathan. I mean, you're there in the planning rooms. That's been your summer, and it will continue to be your summer. I don't know what's going to happen at Michigan, but what mindset should we have that it's going to be different? What mindset should we have?
Well, I think the first mindset to have is that it's going to be different. I mean, so many people want to be back in school, or to be back something close to a normal or a new normal. And that's great. We all want it, but we can't lose sight of the fact we are in a global pandemic. Everything is different right now. And some people feel cheated out of a commencement or a summer internship or job. Like, yeah, it's a global pandemic. So we need to understand that and really accept that in the first place. Look, repeat myself a little bit in what the chancellor said earlier. Research universities, so again, it's one type of higher ed delivery. Research universities are more or less going to be the same thing. Doesn't matter what the presidents and chancellors are saying, what they've been saying for the last few months. I mean, they made declarations 2 months ago, way too early. I mean, there's ulterior motives behind those declarations. The fact is, very few schools will be in person. Now, they might have people on their campuses, but they aren't going to be in classrooms. It's just, who's going to teach the classes? I mean, it's not something that's realistic, especially because so much of a residential experience, well, is residential. And 20-year-olds, I'm sorry, Michael, to attack your generation, but I don't have great faith in your willingness to wear face guards all the time and pledge not to have parties and abide by that pledge. Yeah, and so, you know, we are going to be de-densified, we'll be largely remote, except for those classes where you can only do the work in person. Graduate and professional schools are different in the sense they're usually very small classes. So that can be done sort of at the very ground level in terms of what makes the most sense of delivery. And hopefully we'll be back closer to capacity in the spring semester or the winter term. It's just too early to say right now. I mean, the tough part is people want answers today, but we all know the potential answers change on a daily basis. So we are all making our best guesses, and we've got to prioritize everybody's safety first of all. And again, it's not just the undergrads I'm worried about. I'm actually more worried about the staff and the faculty at our universities. Definitely. And that's only for research universities. The different issues for small liberal arts colleges, community colleges, et cetera.
And that brings us back. It's so complicated, but you know, I just think fleshing these things out in this panel is awesome. I do want to open it up to Q&A from the audience.
Okay, I'd also want to just jump in for 1 second there because, you know, I've been hearing a lot from a number of students that they're wondering whether they should take a gap year. That if this is a time where they're not sure about their online education, should they take a gap year? And I've started to hear some suggestions of maybe they could take a gap year and turn it into a year of service. Because once again, we have fundamental access issues, technology issues throughout our education system. And there could be some really interesting opportunities for bright kids who otherwise might be going to college this year to take a gap year and support some of the learning that happens in other places, whether it's with seniors, whether it's with young kids, whether it's with teachers. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting models in the fall. And to that degree, technology will support changing roles, turning sometimes students into teachers too.
For sure. So yeah, I want to bring up a question from the audience. It's Dagmar Delachko. Comment to all speakers. Educators need to become facilitators that drive inquiry and self-sufficiency, not just deliverers of content via technology. How do you move in that direction when there's less hands-on by the teachers?
So again, we've got a lot of learning to do. EdSurge has spent a lot of time chronicling some of the amazing things that teachers have been doing really over the last, 9 or 10 years to move more towards the facilitator and a little bit less towards the sage on the stage. We're going to be doing a lot of learning from each other. But the point of the questioner is exactly right. We're all going to have to learn to collaborate and learn together. But I want to give a shout out to so many educators who have been already going down this path. More of it's happening than you think.
For sure.
I quite agree. I'll just add very quickly is that in higher ed, but also particularly in the world of K through 12, the teachers are facing incredible uphill battles, especially the public school teachers, where, I mean, we're just talking school supplies, we're talking kids that don't have meals at home. It's just, there are so many different aspects that get in the way of actually learning in the first place that have to be addressed. And there's a role for technology in helping that, absolutely. But what I'd love to see is our states have actually proper funding for our public schools and, well, for our state universities as well. That's why you've seen in a lot of places the tuition's going up, because there's no other way to capture money back because they've been defunded by states. So You know, again, going back to some basics that need to be addressed.
Certainly. So let's move on to another question from the audience. Anonymous. Since different jobs pay different wages, should different degrees, computer science versus philosophy, cost different amounts? And that's interesting given, you know, the different resources that go into each department at a college. And I want to know what you guys think about that.
It's a clever idea, but it doesn't resonate at all for me because I mean, I've been seeing some of the chat. There are plenty of people in the chat, at least I think it's plenty of people who were English majors, but now they're in tech. I mean, you just don't know what your path is. When you're 19, 20, 21 years old, most people are going to end up doing something quite different than what their degree suggests they are going to be doing. That's just been a radical change over the last 20 years in US society. So I get the point, but I don't see how it works in a way that's reasonable. Not for undergrad degrees. Grad school, different story, perhaps.
Another question from the audience from Ian Havenshield, which is, sorry if I mispronounced your name. What options are there for college students whose their in-person internships have fallen through? What if there's a way to get them remote internships, whether that be through an app or a website? Should colleges be making it so companies can give internships to students this summer for credit and make that a super easy, seamless process? Because businesses need the help of college students right now. And college students are sitting around with nothing to do because their internship got canceled or they're not able to get a job. So should remote internships be offered for credit this summer? And should students go ahead and do those and hope that they can get credit for them, because businesses are really hurting right now and they could use the help of college students?
I mean, you better say something, Betsy, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love the basic concept. And I think that we've seen some clever companies look at doing virtual internships. Whether or not students can get that for credit, I don't know. By the end of the summer, it seems like a little bit of a rush given all the other things we're asking colleges to figure out right now. But should businesses be offering online internships? Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things, I won't go into the weeds here, but one of the things that makes it challenging, and this goes to what Betsy was alluding to, it's really not that universities can just flip a switch and say, oh, we give credit to all these things. You have to, we all are accredited by other institutions that, you know, if we aren't doing things by the books, we actually are in trouble ourselves and can't process federal loans. It gets very complicated. That's one of the reasons things get bogged down in higher ed, about that we aren't built to switch. In fact, it's amazing that we switched so quickly in the spring in this emergency mode, and all of us were writing to our accrediting agencies saying we need a waiver. And the accreditors were saying, we'll give you one, just keep going, we'll sort it out on the other side, because everybody knew it was an emergency. Internships for credit will not rank as highly as trying to get people safe in terms of the ability for groups to turn on a dime.
I will say that Coursera has started offering project-based courses, and it just started doing this about 60 days ago, and they've already had 400,000 people sign up for them, which is kind of interesting. So it speaks to the fact that there's an appetite there. You're absolutely right about that. But once again, I think that all of our friends in both higher ed and other schools have an awful lot of stuff, a lot of logistical stuff that they've got to figure out right now. And that's really where they need to be spending their time and energy for this particular school, you know, for this period of time.
So I'm not seeing too many more good questions, but how can professors make their online classes more engaging? What tips do you have to, you could do this Q&A thing. Like, that's pretty cool, right? Like, I'm the professor. Now I can see and I can pull how students are feeling about the coursework. I can measure their engagement. They can leave tips to me while I'm presenting. So, other than just the Zoom functionality that teachers will need to learn the ins and outs of, for sure. I mean, come on, Zoom's easy, but a lot of teachers, Jonathan, you called yourself a dinosaur, and I don't mean to say you're a dinosaur, but it is an environment. So how can teachers do better online?
Yeah, I will just emphasize how important the question is because, you know, we have faculty who are ranging in age from say 28 to 78, and there is a different level of facility across these populations when it comes to technology, or even a willingness to try. And that last part is very frustrating for administrators, for deans, for students, when you have faculty who really aren't interested in trying to make their class engaging and compelling and use the technological tools that there already exist on campus, like the basic stuff. So I'm not claiming to have an answer, but I want to underscore the importance of the question.
So I want to do a short kind of advertisement. I'm involved with a conference that a number of people have been putting together. It's going to happen in July, entirely online. It's called theremotesummit.org, and it is entirely on this subject. It's entirely around how to provide some support to faculty who are rethinking how to teach their courses for the fall. And we've pulled together a lot of instructional designers, folks who've been doing that for a while. We've pulled together a lot of faculty, some leading faculty who have been successful at teaching online. So if anyone is involved in higher ed, it's entirely free. It's got a lot of philanthropic support behind it and some terrific folks. And it's again called the site is theremotesummit.org. And don't know if there'll be all the answers there, but hopefully there will be a few answers there.
So we still got 85 people here. I just want to wrap up with one last question, and then we'll send things off and sail off. You know, there's obviously the conversations are crazy right now. The streets are full of protesters. With the police having this really dang good riot gear and tanks and military trucks, should we be reallocating that money to teachers? To compensate them for what they're doing to train and grow American students? Should we be taking it from that honey pot and putting it in education? Because I think we should.
Look, well, I'm the son of a military vet, okay? And so I'm a big believer in the important role of the military and the police to play in a society. Military police are very different roles, by the way. I don't like the militarization of the police that we've seen happening across different political parties for the last couple of decades. But I'll take anything in terms of funding for public education. I mean, that's a big softball. I mean, you can make it political by saying defunding the police, but I think it is frankly a national disgrace that we underfund public education so much in this country. And that has been something that, quite separate from the funding of police departments, has been going on for the last 20 or 30 years. So not a new problem, you know, sell a few less jets, give the money to state of California, state of New Jersey, whatever, and let the magic happen in the classrooms.
If you ask anyone on this call, if you ask anyone on the street, what's the most important thing to you? If they are a parent, they will tell you it's their child. And what they mean by that is they mean helping their child build a future. Education is still our strongest, most fundamental way of helping people build a life. And the fact that we make it the nth number priority is a tragedy. So yes, we should do anything we can.
Well, thank you so much, guys. We're going to wrap it up and hand it off to Amanda and Doug. Amazing talking to you guys. Great energy. Love the conversation.